Okay, so I did my little intro. I don't know how much people heard because I don't know if it got cut off in the middle.
Well, let's start again. Let's
Okay.
start again.
Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Saul Haimoff. My official title is Rabbi Dr. Saul Haimoff. I have smicha, which is rabbinic ordination from Yeshiva University, and I have a doctorate in clinical psychology from Long Island University, the CW Post campus. And I work now as the head rabbi of the Brandeis School in Lawrence. It's basically like a school administrator, Judaic studies principal, um, in charge of all the religious aspects of the curriculum in the school. I'm sitting here now in the Jewish Center of Atlantic Beach, where I also work as the youth director for the past 5 years, running all the kids programs, and associate rabbi, filling in for rabbinical duties as needed. I have a small private practice in the five towns. In my free time, I try and see just a few patients a week just to keep practicing. And what are my other jobs? And I'm here to talk about a new project that
Wow, you're pretty busy.
very busy. Yeah, I got a lot going on. It's the only way I know how to be.
How did you have time to write a book?
That is a good question. That is a really good question. That's on top of my family of my wife and my four young children that I have at home. Thank God. A lot of hard work and determination. My wife has been an amazing partner, amazing coach, manager, cheerleader, everything to help keep me going. And thank God I like to be busy. I like to be working on things. And it was a really, really long, arduous process, as I'm sure you know yourself. You've also written a book, so it's very, very stressful and unrewarding at first. But the feedback and the buzz about this book that just came out has been amazing. So it's really worth it.
Well, it's sold out, right?
Yeah, it's out of stock. It's being reprinted now, and it's very hard to find. But there's going to be a second printing coming out the next few weeks. I have one copy here with me. This is actually the copy I keep at home. It's a copy I signed for my 9-year-old son.
Somebody just asked what the book's called.
So it's called The Handbook of Torah and Mental Health. And I'll give a little, it's co-authored by Dr. David Rosmarin and yours truly, Saul Haimoff. It's published by Mosaica Press, who's based in Israel, and distributed by Feldheim. And what it is a collection of over 50 sources from the Torah. And by the Torah, I mean any Judaic text. So the Bible, Chumash, Navi, Ketuvim, prophets, Chazal, that's the Talmud, the Mishnah, the Gemara, Midrash, any early commentaries, later commentaries, Jewish philosophers, anything under the sun, Kabbalah, that would be considered Jewish. We researched and explained and then cataloged them into different mental health categories. So there's a
That's
chapter.
My friend Perla, by the way. She's awesome.
John?
Perla. She's
Perla, yeah. Who works there? Yeah.
She's my friend. Yeah.
Oh, she's great. Yeah, she's fantastic.
So Shoshana's on right now. So Shoshana will be announcing who the winner is.
Cool. Nice.
Of the draw. So she might not have it ready yet, but so maybe we could get started, and then towards the end she can surprise us.
Yeah, keep people in suspense, keep people watching to the end.
But it's a very exclusive prize. So if
that's
whoever
right,
gets it, a signed, personalized copy.
Yeah.
Is very lucky. Wait, Shoshana's gonna do it now.
Okay.
She's
ready. Yes, drum roll, please.
I'm excited. Shoshana, did you pick yet? It's like a whole process. You like.
I'm so curious.
She has it ready. She has it ready.
All right.
Ready, everybody? Okay, we're ready, Shoshana. Go.
Don't leave if you don't win.
Oh, she said we could wait. Should we wait?
I don't know. Let's get
in suspense.
Let's go a little bit longer. Maybe we'll do it in the middle. Just let's talk about let's talk about it a little bit and then get people pumped up.
Okay. At 3 Sarah 2. I don't know who that is, but that's
All right.
who won.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. If you're
Sarah. I assume your name is.
Onwards Bound entered her.
Oh, okay. Nice. I
Um,
saw a lot of posts by that person.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So exciting. Okay. So
All right, so
now,
we'll get your info afterwards. Yeah, I'll get
yeah.
the address and everything. Yeah.
Okay, so now that we got that, I'm so excited to get, you got a lot of questions sent to you, right?
Yeah, I got a bunch. And of course people who are watching now could also, post some questions. Yeah, maybe I'll just give a little background about, we'll talk about Torah, mental health, Judaism and psychology and religion. It's such a hot topic right now. It seems to be very trendy. It seems to be something that I think is a good thing that so many communities are really focusing on in the Jewish community. So that's really nice to see.
It is amazing.
Yeah. So I guess, when I think about Torah and mental health, I think about how both Judaism and psychology or therapy are really trying to accomplish the same thing. They're really trying to help us be the best versions of ourselves and help us do introspection and take a good hard look at our habits and our behaviors and see if there's anything we could work on or improve. I think back to my time in yeshiva, and every time of the year, every major holiday, when I was studying there was, a time for self-growth. If it was the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, it was, of course, look at your ways, see how you can be a better person, etc. But even throughout the whole year, there always were times of the year where, the rabbis, the teachers were always encouraging us to try and take on a new good deed to do or to be a better person in some small way. And of course, in therapy, people learn how to be better versions of themselves. They're trying to improve their lives in some way, and there's a lot of hard work involved. And to me, the main goals of both of these fields are really the same. I wonder what you think about that.
I'm wondering. The first thing that comes to mind when you just said that was kind of the idea of taking on a lot. And like rapid growth and black and like I don't know, when I hear like when I think of like my seminary days, like very like black and white thinking, and maybe even and not because of anybody except for myself, because the rabbis and the teachers were really trying to encourage more like slow and steady, but I think we all kind of like get swept up in everything. Yeah. So can you talk about kind of like the aspect of black and white thinking and how it kind of either feeds into, or I don't know how to frame the question.
I
think you know what I'm getting at. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, again, I wasn't my experience when I was in these settings that it was black and white, or that it was kind of big jumps or big, lifestyle changes. It was really more, what I was drawn to was really the idea of trying to grow and trying to be a better person, not being stable, not being steady. Just to throw out a Torah source for this, because why not? They talk about the ramp. That's this week's Parsha, this week's Torah portion. I didn't even plan it this way, but the ramp of the Mizbeach, right? When the Kohen would go off to bring the altar, to bring the service. So it was a ramp and not a staircase. And the idea of a ramp is that when you're on a ramp, you're always trying, you need to go to the top of the ramp in order to be, at the place where you want to be. And a staircase, each step in and of itself is its own level. So the idea of a ramp is that you're always trying to grow and improve yourself in some way. I think that's just a beautiful idea to think about as human beings, that we all could, learn something different and try and improve some habit or some relationship style that we have in our life. And the idea of self-growth and always trying to better yourself is a really beautiful idea that I think exists in therapy and Judaism.
So that's, yeah, for sure. The I guess kind of like where I was going with it was more like the idea of feeling like overwhelmed by the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's so much as far as Torah, like
Yeah.
that there's 613 commandments, and I feel like it could be very daunting, and I know that people kind of get enveloped in shame cycles when they can't do everything, and um
Yeah.
and kind of how I'm sure that was a topic that you came across a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. The idea of making small, incremental, tangible changes is actually a very common theme in this book. It's a few entries, a few chapters talk about um, how Judaism really promotes slow progress. Taking it one day at a time, um, because to really build habits and to change someone's behavior, it is more effective to do. If you think about practicing, for an instrument or studying for a test or learning a certain dance move, instead of practicing for 7 hours straight in one day, if you would spread it out over time, just do a little bit every day over time, it's been shown to be much more effective. So the same idea for personality change and behavior change is really to do one small behavioral change each day. More the consistency is more effective than making sweeping monumental changes all at once.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Very CBT.
Right, CBT, exactly. There's a lot of yeah, that's all from the CBT chapter, cognitive behavioral therapy. Yeah, where yeah, we talk about how to change someone's habits, how to fight an addiction, how to overcome a personality flaw. You're going against years and years of doing it one way, and it's unrealistic to expect that like all of a sudden you go to one session or you go to one Torah class and you get inspired and now you're just going to do it all a different way. We know that so many people try and fail going to the gym after New Year's, etc. That to really affect change, you have to chart a course over a long period of time.
Do you cite in your book? Do you? I haven't read it yet. I'm really excited. It's in the
Yeah,
mail.
your copy's on the way. Yeah, yeah.
But do you cite incidents in the Torah stories where people also struggled in that way?
So that actually is my favorite thing to do, is to kind of analyze, or just, I call it, bring them to the therapy couch, biblical characters, people from the Torah. I do that on a regular basis, but there's only one entry really in the book that really kind of does that. It's a bit of a controversial topic, not for me, but some people, I guess.
I love controversial, but
yeah, who doesn't like a good controversy? But more on the religious side, it's considered, I guess, offensive or even borderline blasphemous to talk about a certain prophet or really important biblical character and say that he was struggling with something like that. But I don't shy away from it. But in the book we talk about Yonah, or in English, Jonah the prophet, and it's a very short entry in the book. But I just gave a talk last week at the YU's farm sale, and we did like a whole deep dive, no pun intended, into the story of Jonah, and kind of looking at it as an analogy for him suffering from depression. And you see a lot of symptoms of depression show up in a very short story, only 4 chapters long. And I just remember sitting, we read that story on Yom Kippur. I remember it was actually my first semester in graduate school, and there's this phenomenon when you first, are learning things like a medical student, where you start diagnosing everyone, your family, with all these, diagnoses that you're just learning about. So I remember reading the story and being like, dude, get some help, man. Go to therapy, because you're suffering. Like he's suicidal. He's no motivation. He's sleeping all the time. He, has very black and white thinking, like you said, and it's a very poignant depiction of what I think depression looks like. So there's a short piece about that in the book, but yeah,
That's
not too
so
much.
cool.
Yeah.
So the book doesn't really kind of talk about the biblical narrative as much, or
Not as much. It's more, a verse here or there. There is a big emphasis on the Joseph story, right? The story of Yosef and his brothers, and which actually that entry we credited to Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, right from who's the best in the business. We have a few entries there that we credited to him because they really were his ideas. He has a piece where he talks about Joseph's ability to look back at his whole life and all these events that happened and really kind of piece it together and find meaning in it and see the good and see, God's hand. And Rabbi Sachs actually talks about therapy and psychology in that piece he has online. He talks about reframing, and he talks about how part of therapy and overcoming trauma or grief or just difficult situations is the ability to look back and reflect and try and see the good. So that story in particular, I think you could really focus on and get a lot of positive messages out of it in terms of what Yosef was able to do.
That's amazing. So, I mean, I have so many questions, but maybe we should start, because I don't want to run out of time before we address the questions that were sent in before.
Yeah, okay. Some of the questions were, I'll talk about some of the things that came up and the questions that were sent to me. Actually, Karen Corin read the Soul Train. Give her a shout out. She sent in a really interesting question, and something that I think we really should kind of say as a disclaimer here. She asked if I don't know if she asked if I think or do I think just in general, Torah or religion is enough to treat mental illness or as a mental health tool.
But wait, are you asking Torah?
Can you use Torah alone, basically, to treat something? Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I was
can I just elaborate on her question before you answer?
Sure. Yeah.
So a lot of people. So this actually came up. Rachel Tuffman was speaking in in my community last year, and the question came up to her about rabbi, whether asking a question to a rabbi that has to do with mental health was okay.
Yeah.
And she basically I'm sure that you have your own opinion on that, and I'll let you know what she said after, but it kind of goes together a little bit, because we
absolutely.
We have this discussion all the time, kind of whether people need to stay in their own lanes or whether they, the overlap.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Appropriate.
Yeah, and it's very common. So I think it's the reality that people will go to their spiritual advisors, whether it's a rabbi, a rebbitzin, a teacher, a colleague, first before they even seek therapy, and it's very common in Jewish communities for people to go to the rabbi with parenting problems or couples issues or just spirituality issues, which are really masking a mental illness. So to that, I would respond by saying, number one, rabbis, again, I'm speaking from both sides here, which, wear two hats. That rabbis, on the one hand, have a great responsibility, and they perform an amazing service by being that initial step, that first, line of defense many times for people. I'll just share that one of the reasons why I was inspired to pursue a degree in psychology was actually in my rabbinic training at Yeshiva University. We had a pastoral counseling class taught by Dr. David Pelkovitz, who's, my idol, right? The best Jewish, the top of the Jewish psychology world. And he was teaching us young rabbis and students how to be, good grief counselors and how to take care of the emotional needs of the community. And from listening to him and hearing about how amazing he is and how he does that, all the time as a profession, I remember having this moment of thinking to myself, I want to do that, all the time. So I finished my smicha, and then I went to go pursue a doctoral degree. So rabbis and psychologists really do overlap a lot. They do a lot of the same stuff. But basically, to answer the question, I think most of the rabbis I know, my colleagues, that I speak to on a regular basis, thankfully have a really good understanding of mental health. It's taught a lot in these, seminaries and rabbinic ordinations programs, that they know when something's over their head, and they hopefully know enough about mental illness to know when someone is describing something that could sound like OCD or bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder or anxiety, and they will refer out. And I think lots of community rabbis have certain therapists that they keep on speed dial to consult, or to, no rabbi really, I think, wants that responsibility of treating something that they know they're not confident to treat.
I don't know. I've heard quite a few.
No, there's plenty of stories out there.
Sure. Where the rabbi really gave advice to families that were detrimental to the family's mental health. I don't think that that's the rule. I think that depending on the community, the rabbis are definitely on top of it. But
sometimes that's very tragic when that happens. Sometimes they do. I think it comes from a place of feeling they want to help, and they could do more than they really realize they can.
Regardless, that many rabbis are not trained in mental health and awareness and don't know how to do referrals. It's true.
Yeah.
Pearl and I have talked about that before.
Well, that's what we're trying to change in the community. We're really trying, at least, what I'm exposed to is Jewish community centers, whether it's shuls or schools, bringing in, having a mental health, maybe whole Shabbat, dedicate the whole Shabbat to mental health, like we do for other, problems, or really bringing in speakers or mental health professionals into shuls and communities to speak to the community about mental health issues. And for sure, we have to do so much more to better train rabbis and to bring more awareness to the communities to tackle this issue.
Well, there are certain communities, like I know, like Perla, who just made the comment before, that like she's part of a Chabad community, and they do, like I know that a lot of the campus communities do awareness, and they're very involved in making sure that that they refer out, and that they know it's amazing what they do.
That's good.
But I do think that there's a lot of work to do just to make sure that people know that when they're asking shilas, when they're like asking their rabbi questions, if it's possibly if there's overlap. Rabbi Shais Taub spoke. Do you know who that is?
Sure. Yeah.
So he spoke. He did a live with Esther Schwartz, and they were talking about the halachot of kibbud av v'em, of honoring your parents, and how if a rabbi is unaware of mental health issues and mental illness, that they might give advice that's harmful.
Absolutely.
And they were saying how specifically family matters like that is very important to consult with people, a rabbi that is consulting with also a psychologist.
Yeah, I hope we continue to improve in this area, and there's a lot of work, like organizations that do, Project Proactive. I think all these mental health awareness organizations that work in Jewish communities have, a big opportunity to bring mental health awareness to shuls and schools. And it's very complicated. It's very tricky. I know I worked with a lot of Jewish and Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox patients, and, religion and it's part of culture. To be a culturally sensitive therapist, you have to know the culture. So you have to know what's considered normal, what's not considered normal for that culture, and what therapy, what, I don't want to say advice, but what techniques or interventions you could recommend that they'd be more likely to listen to than others. And from the other side, you really have to understand the science of the psychology. That, for instance, I really see the most with OCD. There's actually a few recent letters from rabbis who have written, She'elo v'tshuvot, right, response about treating OCD with religion, which is very common. That
Dr. Rosmarin's actually going to be speaking about that in a few months with us.
Oh, great! All right, yeah, he's an expert in that, and there's a lot of good literature, research out there about the Jewish community and OCD. And I know I personally used. There's a famous Rabbi Asher Weiss, who lives in Israel, who wrote two letters about OCD to a patient who wrote. He said he was going to therapy because he's repeating his blessings and his prayers over and over again, and the therapist is telling him that he has to only say it once and he can't repeat it, which is right, the exposure therapy. That's the treatment for OCD. And he was asking a shaila. He was asking questions to the rabbi if he's allowed to listen, if he's allowed to do that. And Rabbi Asher Weiss basically says, do whatever your therapist tells you to do, and you're for sure fulfilling the mitzvah, and you shouldn't repeat it, etc. And but many other times rabbis can inadvertently accommodate or reassure, reinforce the OCD and the anxiety by responding in a way that actually strengthens it. And it's not their fault; they don't know the right way to respond. But that's probably very common.
Mm-hmm. I actually listened to an incredible podcast about it. It was about I can't remember who it was, but he was I think he was. I'm going to post about it after because it was so good, and it was about religious. He wasn't religious, but he was talking about how to support religious OCD, and it was so good. It was so on the ball, and it was. I'll post about it because my mind is.
Yeah, I want to check it out.
But Perla wants to know if you explored the Tanya also in your.
Okay, I love Tanya. So yeah, it's interesting. The Chabad community, right? I think has an amazing, just resource of Torah with their, specifically with the Baal Tanya, and with which we don't have too many sources quoted directly from the Tanya. Although I will say that Rabbi Shai's Taub came to a talk I gave in the Levi Yitzhak Library in Cedarhurst. That's run by the Chabad of the Five Towns, and he came up to me afterwards and approached me about possibly collaborating and doing some more mental health, Torah mental health.
He's amazing.
Yeah, with Tanya. So that would be amazing. We do have the famous quote from, everyone attributes it to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, but I think apparently, based on my research, it originates with the Semach Tzedek, which is an earlier Lubavitcher Rebbe. Trach good, v'zayin good, think good and it will be good, which is a very famous Lubavitch saying that if you think good, if you think positively, then good things will happen. So we do explore that teaching from Lubavitch in our book.
I'm so excited to get the book.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, the book. Every chapter, every entry has a few scientific journals. Research articles they're quoted and cited to support the psychology ideas. So it really is a really good combination of well-researched Torah with original sources, and also really interesting psychology, but with footnotes, with actual support, as opposed to just being what I call like pop psychology or coffee table psychology. Yeah.
So we I think you answered part of the question, but the part that was actually that Karen's original question was whether psychology alone or whether Torah alone was enough.
Right. So to that, I answered her, and I could screenshot it for everyone to see. Absolutely not. That's a very dangerous, and harmful and unethical thing to do, is to say that if someone has a diagnosable mental illness, that they wouldn't go to a trained professional and use evidence-based treatments to treat it. I would never be advocate for that. So what I did answer her is that it could help. You could do spiritually informed therapy, and you could weave in Torah sources to therapy, which I've done many times with religious patients, and it's very helpful. And a Torah lifestyle in general could help you improve your mental health, notwithstanding a mental illness. Meaning, I do believe that Torah and religion, and there's a lot of research to support this, does improve someone's mental health. But just alone, if someone has OCD or bipolar disorder or depression or borderline personality disorder or any of those things, saying Tehillim or davening or going to a rabbi or learning something interesting is not what I recommend as the only course of action.
They work together.
Right. I don't want to say it doesn't help, it doesn't do anything, but if that's the only thing you're going to do, that could be potentially very.
Well, it's kind of like that there's a famous thing that somebody's like stranded on an island and asked and like called out to God for help, and God sent like a boat, and he's like, no, it's okay, I'm
right.
not gonna,
sure, yeah.
God will help me, and then sent a plane, and he's like, oh, God will help me, but like, and then he goes up and to heaven after, and he's like, why don't you save me? And he's like, I sent you a boat, I sent you a plane. I was like, what do you want, right? So like it's not enough to. So you're like, I kind of.
Yeah, no, I know. Right, you have to.
In a little circle, but
there's a Torah sort, V'rapo Yirapeh, right? I think the Torah says, it was last week's parsha, Mishpatim, where if someone has, that's like permission to go to a doctor. The Torah, if someone gets hurt, gets injured, right? And last week's parsha talks a lot about those torts, and a lot of the commentators talk about the theology about going to a doctor. If you go to a doctor, what does that say about God? And I think the Ramban, Nachmanides, talks about how God empowers the doctors to treat. So really, the source of it is all from God, and God created the wisdom that we use to treat these problems. So I think even the Torah itself endorses, going to doctors, going to medical experts. If you break your arm, someone, I don't think any religious person who has, any type of terrible medical condition would not seek medical treatment, would not go to a hospital to treat a heart attack or something like that. So,
well, there are. I've heard of some sects that have like kind of like perverted the teachings where they kind of reject modern medicine altogether, but I think that that's a very huge minority. Like, it's not a mainstream.
Yeah, just go to some of the hospitals here in the New York area, and you'll see, lots of religious people, and it really comes back to treating mental illness, removing the stigma and treating it in some ways very similar to physical illness. That getting back to rabbis and really, if someone came to a rabbi with like a gunshot wound, the rabbi would call an ambulance and
right.
wouldn't start to try and figure out how to tie a tourniquet or something. So similarly, if someone's suffering from a real mental illness, again, I see from the comments that it's different in different communities, but in my experience as a rabbi and also working in different shuls, that I think if once a rabbi identifies that this person has a mental illness, they will at least consult, if not refer out. Sometimes they don't really know enough to know that this is a mental illness. Right? Maybe the person's just a little quirky, they're just a little bit high-strung and nervous, and they're anxious, and the rabbi thinks that, they're just, calling and asking a lot of questions because, they just want reassurance, but really it's a symptom of either severe anxiety or OCD.
So do you talk about any of this in your book at all?
These specific topics, not really. It's really, the book is kind of sources from the Torah, again, from Torah writing, that connect to mental health. So
not like global issues.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Were there any? were there any other questions that were sent in that we should address before?
Some of them were not directly related. There's some interesting ones. Someone asked me about kashrut, keeping kosher, and how that enhances someone's spirituality, their life. So I gave him like a short answer about mindful eating and knowing, the source of your food and really kind of connecting to the activity of eating and, in a mindful way. Yeah. So.
Oh, if Gila Glassberg's on here, that could be your next blog post.
Okay. Yeah. Mindful eating is very.
She's our diet and nutrition blogger.
Very cool. Yeah, that's a very kosher and mindfulness, as I see, is a very popular topic as well. About healthy eating and according to the Torah. Could be another book also.
Well, there's that Rambam diet book, right?
Oh, I heard about that. Yeah.
That was a long time ago book. But.
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah. Look, the basic idea is that the Torah has a ton of wisdom in it, and even the source of all wisdom. And you sometimes have to be creative, but you could really look at the Torah and see so many connections to so many other, areas of life. I've seen people talk about sports, nutrition, even business, science. There's there's something for everyone in the Torah, basically.
So my husband said something very cool, because we talk about this a lot, because I'm a little bit obsessed with the connection between psychology and Torah. I annoy him a lot about it. So he said to me that that prayer is the way that we connect with God, and Torah is the way that God connects with us. So we're able to kind of see in the Torah, like when we read the text, we're able to kind of see what we need to see at whatever stage of life that we're in, and that that you could read the same portion over and over again, and you'll like a different part will be kind of like
absolutely. Yeah. That's the beauty of it, is that you could find something there in the same story you've read over and over again, and also I really feel like it does speak to us. We believe that Torah is timeless, and even in the year 2020, you could read the Torah and see something very relevant, very relatable to your life. And especially with mental health, I think there are so many clear connections. We really tried to make the connections be very direct. There's obviously a lot of stretches you can make between, a Torah verse and then say, how, but we try to keep the relationship really direct as possible. And
there's a lot of sources.
Yeah.
A lot of direct sources that it's not a stretch, but they're not as known because I think that it's been so taboo that like people don't really talk about it. They're like, when I was in high school, I learned Navi, but I think they skipped over a lot of Navi. And then as an adult, I started with my kids. We started last year to try to do Nachayomi, which is for anyone who doesn't know, you do like a portion of Navi, the books of the prophets, and every day, and then after a year you can finish, or you do 2 a day. I don't remember. Anyways, so I started it, and after I finished the second book, Shoftim, I had to take a break because I was actually traumatized. Like it was really heavy and very difficult to read, and I'm like, I don't remember learning this when I was I felt like it was like something that really, I think they really didn't teach it. And so I feel like there's a lot that is related to mental health that really is in the shot, in like the actual
and for sure, and I'm a big proponent of that. I'll take the weekly Torah portion, and there's a few times that I've spoken from the pulpit here in my shul, and I'll do a whole, I call it psychoanalysis. That's a Freudian term, but really what I'll do is I'll try and you know, psychoanalyze, I say bring it to the therapy couch, a certain Bible character. And sometimes you mix in midrashim could teach you a lot. When I was speaking at YU at this farm cell last week, we were talking about Yonah. I preface it by saying that when you work as a therapist and you get a new patient, so oftentimes you could get, especially when I worked in a hospital, you could get like a full summary of their life. When they were born, what milestones they met, what their kindergarten teacher said about them on the report card, every evaluation they ever had, and every treatment and medication they've ever been on. And in the Torah, we don't have that. We get so little sometimes. And you really have to focus on some of the details. If there's a certain word or certain, extraneous thing that's thrown out there, you really have to really take a lot out of that.
Right.
So
you learn a lot by what's not written.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, I think in Tehillim, do you explore Tehillim at all?
Dr. Rosmarin actually has another book that came out earlier where he talks about using Tehillim as like a coping skill, as a resource. And
really, what's it called?
It's called Spiritually Informed Cognitive Behavioral Therapy or something like that. I forgot the exact title. It has the word spiritual, and it's not with me right now. I have it in my bookshelf at home. And it's also like a manual for doing spiritually informed therapy to incorporate.
That's
which
so
is
cool.
Yeah, which is his
and incorporates Tehillim in it.
Yeah, he talks about working with Jewish or even non-Jewish patients and looking at the words of King David and who was suffering through life challenges and how he found strength and using that as a coping skill, as a source of strength. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Can you send me a picture of the book and I'll post it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So for sure, things like Tehillim could be really helpful. Even the story of Yonah, which is one of my favorites, in the second chapter, the whole second chapter is his personal prayer from inside the belly of the beast. And, I kind of use it as a metaphor for, maybe what his world was like. His world was in turmoil. He was drowning. He was, covered in darkness. And he writes this beautiful song that talks about the ups and downs of life and how God kind of saved him. And it really is a nice kind of metaphor for someone suffering from either depression or something else, that they go through these ups and downs and they're in this dark, cold, isolated place. And in those darkest moments, they could reach out to God and utter a prayer of pure desperation, and God could answer them.
Wow. I want to read it. I'm going to read it. But do you think you could share maybe we can post one thought on our blog or something, so people could kind of get a
I'd be happy to. That'd be cool. A little taste, yeah.
Not to put you on the spot or anything, but I think that's so beautiful, and I think that's actually where we should go with this talk, is just kind of how relatable. We were talking a lot this week about narrative therapy and how the Torah is our narrative, and Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, actually, the what's the book? It's an older book, and I think he renamed it Radical Then, Radical Now.
Okay, that was the one.
He renamed it for North America, so I think I can't remember what the new name is, but so it's all about our collective narrative and how it's ours, and he goes through and how it's our, we're part of that Torah. We're that he says something about how the Torah is something about the Torah, and then each paragraph is like a community, and each sentence is the family, and each letter, and we each have to need to identify our own letter and write our own Torah with our family.
Yeah.
kind
All
of
right. That
the Torah.
sounds like a cool idea. Yeah, I'm gonna
I don't know.
look that up.
But maybe you could talk about more about the
Yes.
narrative piece and how.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing, just to kind of also like sprinkle into this conversation is the strong historical and cultural connection between psychology and Judaism, in that so many early famous psychologists were Jews. We're very well represented in the psychology field. I'm talking like some of the big names, obviously Freud and many on down the list that people will learn about in their intro to psych class in college. Are There's so many Jews there, and so one of the most famous psychologists and famous uh, Jewish psychologist is Viktor Frankl, right? Man's Search for Meaning, and of course, the fact that he developed, what he calls logotherapy, and after suffering at the hands of the Nazis in the Holocaust, makes it all the more, meaningful. And he really is Man's Search for Meaning is about finding meaning in life, and there's some amazing quotes. I'll see if I can quickly pull one I'm up here as I'm talking, that in Man's Search for Meaning, that all we do in life is trying to find meaning out of things. And the more meaning you could find in any situation, the easier it is for you to cope and to adapt. So to me, I think that source of hold on, let me try and find it here. That source of, and that idea of, basically that our life has a purpose. We're here for a reason. And if we believe that there's a creator of the world, and that there's some epic journey that we're on, and we're all placed here, like you're saying by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, that every one of us has our own purpose and mission to accomplish, then that has been shown even scientifically to give people, a sense of meaning and healthier, mental health. That people who are depressed oftentimes feel like they don't matter, like they don't have a reason to be alive, and that no one would even notice if they were gone. And the whole essence of being Jewish and what Viktor Frankl really advocated was that finding meaning in your life and why you're here and what purpose you have in the world is an excellent way to live a better life. I wasn't able to find it as I was talking. I'll try and find one particular source, but he has two quotes from that
I
book.
think
But
we have a few that we've quoted. When we interviewed Ellie Nash. Do you know Ellie Nash?
no.
So he's one of the co-founders of Mic Drop. So it's all about, like, he based it a lot on sharing your the sharing your story idea on Viktor Frankl's teachings.
No.
You check them out; they're really cool.
Yeah.
It's a very
Yeah.
cool.
No, it's really powerful stuff. To get to narrative therapy, what that is basically a therapist who can help someone like make a narrative, make a story. We're talking before about the Torah being a storybook, and where do you fit in this story? And it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's not just random and coincidences. So sometimes this works really well with children who have been kind of abandoned or gone to different foster homes, and just their life just doesn't really make sense to them. They just end up in different people's care. And when I worked at an inpatient hospital, and even just to make a timeline of like their life, just with no interpretation, no meaning, just to map it out of like, in this, I lived in this place for a few years, and then this happened, and I went to this place. Just it puts it on a timeline. It helps it just make sense. So that's the first step of narrative therapy. Sometimes, just to make order to everything.
I think that's actually. I was actually talking to one of my kids today about that, because we were having a hard time having a dialogue. He was having a hard time with something, and he was trying to share it with me, and I was having a hard time following it. So we decided he was going to write it down.
Mm-hmm.
He came up to me after, and he's like, Ima, that was really helpful, because sometimes I have a hard time kind of like figuring out what I'm trying to say, and then and there's so much power in formulating your thoughts.
Yeah, well, you use a different part of your brain when you write versus when you speak also. So sometimes people sometimes say that they have to write it out, if it's like a speech or something. And that's a really powerful technique that you used. And I actually remember working with a family, and they had this child who was very, rude and disruptive, and they would constantly fight. The mother and the son didn't get along at all. And I had them actually text each other instead, like from their rooms in the same house. And I found that their fights were much more civil and much more kind of thought out, than when they were just yelling at each other. So for sure, texting and writing could really help people express themselves.
Coach Mike says he loves you.
Oh, I see that. Moish, I love you too. You're a rock star. It's the best.
So can you tell me more about, or tell us more about the different parts of the brain that are used for writing versus speaking, and would certain people not benefit as much from writing, or would it benefit everybody?
So again, it's really good to use different modalities and to figure out different ways of helping people express themselves. If my wife were sitting here right now, she'd be yelling at me because she's an art therapist. So she uses art as her modality to help people express their feelings and thoughts. And for sure, and there's obviously sand therapy, and there's dance therapy now, and there's so many ways to help people really process their feelings. And so for many people it could be writing, but you shouldn't force that on someone if that's not their best mode of communication. But definitely to use different parts of the brain, especially with children children don't sit kind of like, hey doc, I had a tough week this week, and let me tell you about what's on my mind. Children don't really do that. So you really have to, play therapy, it comes out in their play. Of course, art therapy. So the point is that the human psyche is very complex, and we, hold feelings in all different kinds of places. Even, of course, Vander Kolk with the body keeps the score when he talks about trauma, right? So he talks about how using the body to process trauma.
My favorite book.
Oh my gosh, it's a classic. So for sure, writing could help. And we were the people of the book. So Judaism very much emphasizes written text and reading the text and writing our stories down as a way to keep our story alive. And if you think about the Jewish people as on a macrocosm, like as this giant entity, this one personality, we've suffered so many traumas and so many trials and tribulations along the way. And I think what kept us strong is our story, our narrative, and writing it down, and having the Haggadah, and having the Purim Megillah, and having all these books to read to say, look at this story, and they try to kill us, we won, let's eat. So it's very much writing and narrative therapy is very much part of Judaism.
It's so interesting that you brought those two stories up. I mean, there's lots of stories, but obviously we have Purim coming up. I actually have a blog post that hopefully I'm going to post tomorrow about the Purim narrative, and I'm not going to spoil it.
Okay.
But everyone can read it.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
But the Seder, the Passover Seder, Pesach Seder, it's so multi-modality, as you said, and pretty advanced for its time. Did you look into that at all?
I didn't, but that's going to be in the next one, and of course, with your credits, or you should do it. That's really cool. I'm glowing now. I love that. The Seder is multimodality, right? We get eating, storytelling, acting out, reading.
Well, it's all about experiential learning, right? So it's not just about reading the story. There's really different actions and built into it, and the way that we practice today is you know, the kids like bring their art projects and they dress up, and then like, I mean, we really take it to the next level. But I mean, I don't think that that was necessarily what was intended back in the day, but you know,
No, I think
like,
like, yeah, the Rambam Chayev Adam Lerot Atzmo Kilu. I've got the whole line that you have to see yourself as if you left Egypt. I've used that's not in the book, but I've used the Pesach Seder, especially in the school that I work in. Last year, I spoke about how it's the perfect educational model. How really it's the art of teaching. Because if you look at it very carefully in the Haggadah, we don't actually tell a story at all. Like we don't actually say, once upon a time there was a king named Pharaoh and he was right. Like, we don't actually read the Torah version of the story at all. It's all about the retelling of the story, meaning if you
how
if you
they
actually
set it up.
how right exactly like all the midrashim, all of the extra things, because it's teaching us how to tell a story and how
That's
to.
so interesting. That's like just took mine.
Yeah, we
That
combine
just
right.
like took my thing and like took it to the like, I never really thought about it that way.
That's actually, so I have to give credit to Rabbi David Foreman's Rabbi David Foreman from Aleph Beta.
Oh, that's
Thanks so
also
much
a
for
great
the
resource.
tour. Who got something to try? That's what I thought I was going to say. So Rabbi David Foreman talks about how the Pesach Seder is basically not to get too technical, but we read the passage of Arami Oved Avi that we read about the farmer who brings his bikurim to the Beit HaMikdash and his first fruits, and he says he tells the story, and that's how we open the Haggadah. The Maggid section opens with that. So we're actually telling the story from the point of view of the first person to tell it, not of who it happened to. So
And then also the four sons.
right. Yeah.
It's like, where does that fit into the story?
Exactly. There's all this extra stuff there that if you want to tell a story, just open the Chumash and read from Sefer Shemot and like read the whole thing straight. That's how you tell a story. But we don't do any of
But it's
that.
not about that. It's about how are you going to, and behold over a door, and like it's going to be different. The way you're going to tell it is going to have to connect differently,
Right.
within each generation, right? And every
Yeah.
generation will connect differently to the story and will have a different, have to find their own place within it.
Right. In the story. Yeah. So storytelling.
I see a collab coming on.
Yeah. That was cool. I love that Seder thing with the
I don't
multimodal.
know. Project Proactive Haggadah. I don't
Oh,
know.
the Torah and mental health Haggadah
Oh, and
with Project Proactive.
with
Yeah.
Project Proactive.
Yeah. Or Project. Yeah. Or whatever. Just
Collab.
yeah. I love it.
Okay. I'm excited. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I actually have all the text ready to go. Like
Oh,
the actual.
oh, you have it. Yeah.
Yeah. I made my mom a Haggadah for her birthday one year.
That's beautiful. There's a huge market for. That's what I love about Judaism is it's, customizable. I guess I would say. I mean, people could really find their place in Judaism. You could find there's the Harry Potter Haggadah that came out. One of my students showed me this emoji Haggadah. There's no words at all. The whole thing is all emojis.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it's really intense. It's like really hard to follow.
So ours is full of family jokes that like nobody would get if they came to the Seder. They would think we're crazy. But it makes our Seder really fun.
Yeah, all families. That's what families do is they pass on their traditions and their stories. So really, and in terms of mental health, in terms of like healthy living, like you said, having a narrative is so important. Fitting into that narrative, like this famous idea you mentioned, the four sons. The fact that the the wicked son, is at the table. He has a line in the story. We give him a microphone to speak because we care about his part of the story as well. Giving people a voice and really helping people heal and cope with life by helping them feel like they're part of a story. Because if everything is random and there's nothing really meaningful about anything, then what's the point of really even being alive? It's a very scary thought. So helping people find meaning, just to come full circle, is really a really important tool for any therapist to use.
So do you use Torah within your therapy? I think you mentioned something about that.
I will, I don't jump to that. It's only if the person I'm working with, either A, brings it up, or invites me to go there. But definitely I try and connect with the people I'm sitting with all the time. So if they're into music or sports, I'll relate to them, or whatever it is that they're, are interested in. But for sure, a religious, Jewish person, sometimes I don't see it coming. I'll just whip out like a Dvar Torah from the Parsha, or like something from Daf Yomi, and they'll be like, especially if they're from a more religious circle, they'll kind of like, I earn some street cred in their eyes or something like that. But at the same time, if I'm trying to get a message across, if I could weave in a different source, like a non-psychology source, a Torah source that speaks to them, especially like, let's say the Tanya, if I'm working with a, Lubavitch person, it also hits them in their brain in a different way, like in a different place. And they sometimes could relate to it more or internalize it more than if I, didn't do that.
So it's funny that you say that. I have this theory that depending on what you gravitate towards spiritually, like hashkafa wise, like if you're more into like Chasidu, like I don't know how to translate that.
Mysticism, yeah.
Or more, so that will depend on the way that what types of therapies that you might gravitate more toward.
Oh, I like that. I
have
guess
this whole theory on that, because I happen to be somewhere in the middle. Like I appreciate both, right? Like I appreciate both, like the Musar kind of stuff and also the Hasidus kind of stuff. And I'm pretty similar in the modalities that I appreciate. Like I think it's like the coolest, and I would like to do a study on that to see if that's true.
You should. I think you're onto something. I had a similar idea when I was in graduate school. I noticed that I almost did my dissertation on this very similar topic. Yeah,
that's so cool.
I noticed that in my program it was called a dual orientation program, because we were trained in CBT, right, cognitive behavioral therapy, and evidence-based treatment, but also psychodynamic therapy, which is
more spiritual.
Right. And I noticed that the professors and the faculty was split. We had psychodynamic therapists and faculty members and CBT ones. And the CBT ones were tend to be more, I guess, like atheists and more like kind of cut and dry and very scientific with their approach, and like,
or like David Rosmarin type.
Right. But he's a religious person. But yeah, exactly. Right. More,
like I've talked about it. Like he's very straight.
Yeah. Exactly. Logical, rational, etc. And the psychodynamic professors who talked about, Freud and dreams and, unconscious forces, also were more spiritually inclined and more into mysticism and things that are unknown or unseen. So I thought that was an interesting, correlation there, that, if you believe in something that you can't test or, find evidence for professionally, then you might also do that, personally. So yeah, it's a really interesting study.
Yeah. I have another question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, did you look into like the cognitive dissonance, as far as like, let's say you work with teenagers, right? No, older than that.
No, the children and teenagers are my specialty. But,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I know that teenagers kind of go through this whole phase of trying to figure out their place in, I mean, any age you could be going through that, but I know that kind of
their identity, trying to find their role, who they are.
Yeah, and then you kind of throw some curveballs at them, spiritually, or not spiritually, religious. Well, it's not the religious curveballs, it's the social curveballs, and then you kind of have that whole cognitive dissonance thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm phrasing my question properly, but maybe you can try to.
Okay, well, there's two ideas that come to mind, based on the words that you're saying. But there's a piece on cognitive dissonance, but not specifically related to teenagers and their identity, more about the idea of the fill-in, which is also from like two or 3 weeks ago. It's fill-in that we wear on our arms, connect to our heart, and Rav Kook says represent our behaviors, our actions, and the tefillin shel rosh that we wear on our head, it represents our cognitions, our mind, our intellect. And there's a halacha, a rule that you're not supposed to have any interruption between the two. You have to put one on, and without talking, you have to put on the one on the head, and also you never wear the shel rosh on your head without wearing the shel yad on your arm. The idea to have a streamlined connection between your thoughts and your feelings, or your thoughts and your actions, which is what cognitive dissonance is.
That's so cool. I love that.
Yeah. So that's a really cool one. That's in the book, and that's from Rav Kook, talks about that. And that one I think about a lot, because cognitive dissonance is really an important concept for people to figure out, because we quote a journal study about cigarette smoking and addiction, that many times people could understand cognitively that something is bad for them, but they just won't stop it because there's a disconnect between what they know and what they feel.
Right. So yeah. I think that's kind of where I was going with it, because I've had this conversation with lots of people before about kind of, the kids want to keep Shabbos, but they have their phones and their social life, and that's how they know how to connect. So they're kind of torn between the two worlds.
And then they end up changing their beliefs, right? We know that people, it's much harder to change their behavior. So instead of saying, I'm going to stop doing that, they'll start saying, well, is it really not allowed? Maybe the rabbis made it up, or it's not really electronic. People kind of justify their beliefs. They justify their behaviors, and they change their beliefs to match it more often than they will do the opposite.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, sure. Basically,
cool.
It's really interesting with cognitive dissonance. How that works is that when your beliefs are not in sync with your behavior, so you have a teenager who's using his phone on Shabbos, so you have to change one of them. There's dissonance, right? They're not matching up. Like, that you're a religious Jew and you keep Shabbat and you can't use your phone, but yet you're doing it, or like you want to do it. So something has to give. So you would think that you should match your behaviors to be in line with your beliefs, that if you believe something is wrong, that you won't do it. But that's not what people do at all. Overwhelmingly, people do the opposite, where they'll keep their behaviors the same, and they'll just change their beliefs to match it. So over time, you'll see kids start to rebel and say, they start to change their beliefs. How do we know that this is really true, or is this really wrong? Whatever they come up with.
And that's more comfortable to change your beliefs rather than your actions?
Oh, yeah. It's so much easier to change your beliefs.
But doesn't that kind of rock their entire world when, they end up?
Yeah. Well, deep down it does. But on the surface, they're kind of rationalizing things or justifying things just to keep, so they don't feel a dissonance. But yeah, but deep down, there is dissonance. But it's much easier to change your beliefs.
That's so interesting. I feel like that answers a lot of questions that I've been having lately about different topics that have been coming up. I get a lot of messages about. I'm just speaking.
Okay. No, it comes up a lot in college. I think about my best friend who went to I went to Yeshiva University, which was a Jewish environment, but my best friend went to NYU, and we both were in Yeshiva together, and then we went to college, and over time, he was, became less and less observant. And I remember going for a walk with him one Shabbat night, and he, had all these questions about things you are and are not allowed to do. He had a girlfriend, and where does it say that you can't do this or you can't do that? And I saw that he had so much dissonance, meaning on the one hand, his behaviors he knew were not in line with his beliefs, and he knew what he was doing was wrong, but he didn't want to stop doing what he was doing. He just wanted it to be okay. So So he was looking to kind of justify it, which is a very normal and even healthy thing to do. It's just, it really comes back to the fact that changing behaviors is so hard, and it's really hard to really change the way you are. But changing your beliefs, you could just, you read a book, you hear an interesting lecture by a professor, and now you're an atheist.
So I guess that's a very hopeful statement, because if it's that easy to change your beliefs, to impact your action, to I guess alleviate your guilt about or shame or whatever about your actions. So if it's that easy to change your beliefs one way, then it should be that easy to change your beliefs the other way within a like a therapy session. A lot of that is about identifying misguided beliefs.
Right, faulty, right, or maladaptive, thoughts, and absolutely right. The whole CBT is based on changing your belief, changing your perception of something.
So that's actually another quote. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says, if you believe that something could be broken, then you should believe it could be fixed.
Right. Yeah.
So that kind of like goes along with that. So if what you're saying is that the changing the beliefs is easier than the action, then that therapy should be a breeze.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a breeze, but it's definitely a good starting point to change beliefs before you change, actions. They're definitely more fluid. You could challenge beliefs. People are so easily, people, you go to a magic show, an illusionist, people believe. What's the phrase? The suspension of disbelief, right? When you go to a movie, like you have, or being hypnotized. But actually, a ton of social scientists have tried to figure out how to change people's behaviors, how to get people to buy a certain product, or, to shop a certain way, and that is much, much harder to do. So
interesting. I never really thought about it like that.
Yeah. And that's represented in the tefillin. The tefillin shell yad, which represents actions. That's primary in certain ways. That's always on. Men who put on tefillin every day will know that you have to put on that one first, and then you put on the shell rosh, and then when you take it off, you do the opposite. So you never have the beliefs without the actions. Because in Judaism is a very action-based, religion. It's not enough just to believe in something; you have to act on it. So that's kind of represented in the tefillin as emphasizing the one on the hand. That's for the actions.
That's really cool.
And that mitzvah comes up 2 weeks ago in Parshas Bo with the story of Paro, right? Paro and his heart was hardened. Actually, I wrote a little blog entry, which I'll share with you so that you could post it on the Project Proactive website, about how that was Paro's downfall. That was his fatal flaw, is that his heart was hardened. I mean, he understood that God runs the world and God was, bringing all these plagues, but he couldn't, rationally understood it, but he couldn't internalize it in his heart and his emotions. So that prevented him from acting on what he believed by letting the people go. So that's why the tefillin is in that same parsha. Is a theory I try and develop.
There was I can't remember what the source was, but I think it was in the same parsha where the Egyptians got warnings before the plague of the wild animals, and if they brought them inside, not the wild animals. I
think it was hail. I think it was hail. But there's one. I forgot which plague it was. But
it was something. But if they would have, they got warning, and no, it couldn't have been, because they had already witnessed a few plagues before. They knew that it was going to happen, and I'm messing it up. Forget it. But anyways, the point is that they had all the ample proof that it was going to happen, and yet they still didn't. They still didn't do any action.
Yeah.
To they knew that their animals were going to get killed, and they still didn't.
Yeah, and people do this all the time. People with addictions, they are literally killing themselves, and or a doctor telling someone who's overweight or has high cholesterol that to go on a diet. The knowledge that they're doing that something is bad for them or something is wrong is not necessarily going to get them to
Coach
change.
Bush just said, sounds like an addict.
Yeah, 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 I was thinking of Coach Moore said you're definitely the expert on this. Spoke about this a lot. That getting an addict or anyone who does a certain behavior that they're trying to get rid of, trying to explain to them rationally that why what they're doing is wrong is not going to be so effective to change their behavior. You have to come up with behavioral tricks to get it to get them to change their behaviors.
That's so cool. So there's another tie in there.
Yeah.
Did you tie it into addictions in your book?
We talk a lot about like antecedents and about behavioral techniques to overcome either addictions or other things. Like the Rambam talks about tshuva gemura. Full tshuva, full repentance is when you're in the same situation again that you sinned in, but this time you don't sin. And the idea of stimulus control and certain substance abuse treatments or anger management treatments, they'll purposely trigger the person in a safe, contained, controlled therapy setting to have them practice self-control, right? And willpower, instead of just sending them out into the world saying, okay, like now you learned all these things, like go practice it. They'll actually, the more you could rehearse it and role play, resisting the drink or resisting whatever it is, you actually are more likely to follow through with that when you're on your own. So we talk about that, the Rambam's tshuva gemura, about being in the same situation again, actually helps you do full tshuva because now you could overcome it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm really
I can talk about this all night.
I don't know what time it is, by the way.
I feel bad, I feel bad for people who, are being polite, but I feel like it's kind of late. It's 10:30.
Oh, okay. It's going to cut us off anyway, so we should say goodbye, and we'll do some follow-up posts. And I'm really happy that we talked, and I can't wait to read your book.
This was awesome.
And I'm excited about our Haggadah,
Yes, we got to do that Haggadah. Yeah. And let's announce the winner again of the book. It was Sarah something.
We'll post about it.
Okay, post the winner. Congratulations.
Yeah. And then we'll get her in touch with you. And if anyone wants to pre-order our Haggadah, they can let us know.
There you go. I love it. Thank you everyone for watching. To be continued.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, you too. Have a good night. Bye-bye.